나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 higher stage, lower stage. We're not talking about smarts here. We're talking about the level of everyday life in samsara being with fewer obstacles, fewer distractions. Distractions being the key word versus people with a tremendous amount of distraction, which requires a more direct teaching. Because without all the distractions, believe it or not, were you to be alive 1,000 years ago, your pondering of the nature of your life, the life of others, the life of the planet, would be far more an occupation, an everyday occupation of your life. Yes, I hear some of you out there saying, yeah, but we're also in the land of abundance, the time of abundance. So you would have been spending a hell of a lot more time worried about food and shelter and that kind of things. Yeah, no argument there. But your day-to-day existence of feeding yourself, your family, others, as important as it is a singular preoccupation. So that in even that endeavor, you would no doubt be including that in your mind of what is the meaning of this? I'm tired of hunting. I'm tired of growing. How do I make my life better? How do I understand this whole drama of the universe as I sow and harvest my crops, feed my cattle, so on and so forth? Do you see the overall number, the sheer quantity of distractions would be far less? Today, we can't count the number of distractions. If you honestly sit down and try to capture every thought you have that is of a distinct concern, of an anxiety creating, you'll see how they multiply, each and every one of them, to the point where there's so many of them that you can barely take inventory of them all day long, let alone ask yourselves or try to resolve yourselves to the larger questions. You're too busy trying to tread the water, right? Just keep your head above. Why am I here is like, let's just get to the shore, right? So the language, the translation that says lesser or greater, higher stages, lower stages, don't misunderstand that as being about your capacity or your ability. See it as learning to swim in a pool with a friend who's helping you is a much calmer, more focused, easily focused environment to learn how to swim. But when you fall off an ocean liner where the deck is 100 feet above you and you're in the middle of the ocean, throw me a damn rope It's not time to learn how to swim, right? So you could say that's a lower stage, but it's only lower by virtue of the surmounting obstacles of distractions. So I want to make sure you understand that. Thank you for being here. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope this podcast finds you in good health and secure. That's very important these days, if you haven't noticed. And while we're at it, all the regular tedium of reminders, please, I'm assuming you're finding some value in these videos. Take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe. If you want to hit the notifications so you know whenever, I do these videos almost every day and sometimes twice a day. So you can just check in regularly. If you're like me, sometimes notifications are annoying. But at the same time, I'm getting older and more forgetful, and I need the reminder. But so, if you want to subscribe and alert, notifications, go right ahead. My concern is mostly that you subscribe and you like these videos because it really affects the algorithm. I don't know that the subscription, the notifications button does anything for the algorithm. I haven't seen anything that says that. So do it if you like. Don't do it. Just know that I'm going to be here doing this until I'm extinct. Okay? And hopefully this hundreds and hundreds, we're going to be approaching on 800 videos here this year on this channel. So between this and the website, threefoldlotus.com, and the bookstore, the mandala store, hopefully this will remain for quite some time. We have some time yet to work that out, I think. Who knows? Maybe one of you or someone new will be local or be in this area, and there'll be somebody I can transfer this whole huge not backlog, but collection of scholarship and take over. As yet, it's just me. So in that regard, the patrons of this channel, of this Sangha, through Patreon and through paypal.me/SifuSylvain, you guys are amazing. Okay? So thank you. All right. So we're in the midst of the 4 depths of commitment, resolve, conviction, and the 5 stages of practice. And beyond translation difficulties, I'll try to keep this information, this letter, on task so that you understand Nichiren's communication with Toki Jonin. Yeah. And now we're in part 4, the truer the teaching, the lower the stage. And again, there's that lower the stage thing. And the lesser the obstacles. I'll try to maintain that translation throughout so it'll make sense, right? So, question, where's the proof for this? Is this just your opinion, or is this, as taught by Shakyamuni? Answer. Facile 6 of the Great Concentration and Insight, this is Tendai's teaching, right, asserts, quote, the pre-Lotus teachings, the pre-Myoho Renge Kyo teaching, were intended for those in the stages of lesser distractions who could benefit from the teaching of expedient means. In other words, just by learning analogies and stories, like the Emperor's New Clothes, that would have profound changes in their daily living, their daily thoughts. And simply with those eye-opening stories, their minds could move toward enlightenment with far less distractions and obstacles, you see? So many of them were capable of awakening their Buddha. But as time progresses, as the capacity of the people to have greater and greater numbers of distractions and other things to do, the teachings weren't as effective in providing enough insight for people to attain enlightenment. And that's a function, right, of the fact that those teachings weren't really meant to be the way of attaining enlightenment. They were just stages of mental development until the Lotus Sutra. But those teachings, they never were devoid. The target was always enlightenment, awakening. It's not like he held that back. And this is where the analogy of the mathematics that I often use, where you got to learn how to subtract and add and divide and multiply before you can learn algebra, right? That's very logical. And yes, the teachings did proceed in that way. But the notable exception is that even when we were learning to add and subtract, we knew as a far-off concept, as an idea, that this was going to help us attain understanding of man on the moon, rocket science, how the world works, how the universe works. We didn't have the delusion that understanding that 2 + 2 = 4 would land us on the moon. But conceptually, we knew where this was headed. So if you could add that caveat to the regular teachings of secular schooling, then you'd have something that was a little closer to what the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha were. So this is speaking from the standpoint that those teachings were very effective for the people at the time because it was to the capacity that they could understand and to the degree that they could get profound insights enough to afford some of them fully awakening. Well, that was a bonus, but it wasn't a universal, it wasn't an expectation of being the complete teaching. Not until we get to the Lotus Sutra where, okay, now we have to teach a way that anyone, high, low, blah, 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 all the various adjectives, right? Anyone, anything actually, can perceive immediately Buddha. So we'll continue here. Annotation on the Great Concentration and Insight. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't finish the earlier sentence. While the perfect teaching is intended for those in the stages of a great numerous distractions, and therefore in a lower stage, a lower day-to-day existence of a clear path to enlightenment, by virtue of the tremendous amount of distractions in the way, distracting our mind, right? Who could only benefit from the teachings of true reality. Let's forget the analogies. Let's forget all the stories. Let's forget. Now we assume that you are of a mind that is fully aware of its constant influences and preoccupations, right? We need something to lead us to our Buddha that's super direct. That the moment we do it, it's working. That the moment we do it, it's so effective that all other distractions in our minds is pushed out. Let me breathe. Let me get to the central, the core, the truth, and operate from there. That is our age, our time, and that teaching is Myoho Renge-kyo. You see? Annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, "The passage cited about the earlier teachings correctly distinguishes between the provisional and the true. This is because it explains that the truer the teaching, the more essential the teaching, the more on point the teaching, the more direct the teaching, the lower the stage of those enlightened by it." In other words, the lower, look at it as a lower environmental, like samsaric position. That position is one that's inundated by distraction, keeping your mind away from Buddha. Whereas the more provisional the teaching, the earlier the teachings, the higher the stage must be of those enlightened by it. In other words, the fewer and fewer distractions, the more time those people had to gel and practice profoundly the insights of Shakyamuni Buddha. The pool, much easier to swim in a pool with a friend helping you, friends helping you, than to learn immediately while you're thrown overboard on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, right? Facile 9 of the annotation of the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra says, quote, "The stage of attainment can be determined in this way. The more profound the sphere of contemplation, the lower the stage of the people it is intended for." Again, that sounds confusing, so I remind you, the lower stage is a condition of environment of samsara, meaning the amount of distraction and influences holding you back, distracting you from, taking your focus away. Okay? Setting aside the other schools, because that's a whole different debate, why should the scholars of the Tendai school turn away from, quote, "the truer the teaching, the lower the stage," and rely on the writings of Venerable Eshin instead? Where are you going? Where are you going? Why are you going off of there? Why are you creating your own distraction? The answer's here. Why else? Ego, yeah? The teachings of Subakarashima, yeah, the great charlatan, Vajrabodhi and Amogashvajra, as well as those of Jikaku and Chisho, who fell under the spell of that ego teaching, can wait until later, as this is the serious issue. Stop looking for these distractions and other ways around concentration. It's already happening. People are easily distracted. Damn it, stay here and see what's here, what's of value. It may not be handed out as easily. It may require that, you do a little work. But don't go run off to that ego fest. Gosh, the answer's here. So serious, in fact, that in all of Jambudvipa, it is the single most important issue. Well, yeah, that's what this whole conversation is about right now, is why do you succumb to distractions which will lead you nowhere instead of focusing on the issue at hand, the perfect teaching? Don't you want to attain Buddhahood? Or do you just want to be popular, part of a club? This is I hear myself say this and I think, how can we not, as we read Nichiren, see this in our day-to-day, It's very contemporaneous. It's more proof that Nichiren is our mentor of our time. Those who can think for themselves should at least hear me out before rejecting what I have to say. It's kind of an edgy, it's almost an insult, isn't it? But he's saying, look, if you can think for yourself and not be, pulled away by the whims of popularity and ego, if you're really serious about Buddhahood, hear me out. Okay, Nichiren, we'll hear you out. Next portion. The method of practice for beginning practicers in the latter age. Handy. A lot of people have that question, especially when we're first starting out, right? How am I supposed to practice? Remember, this is part of Tokijonin's questions to him. I have conviction. I believe what you're saying. But how do I practice with that conviction? I'm struggling, right? Because there are these distractions constantly trying to pull me away. My ego, that looks more fun, right? So it seems easier, but what is easier? What does it accomplish? Just crowd, just being part of a group. There's no enlightenment built into that, right? So, what is the method of practice for the person starting out with conviction to attain Buddhahood? Question. In this latter age of degeneration, what should a beginning practicer refrain from practicing? Interesting approach. Since there are so many distractions, what shouldn't I do? Answer. Beginners should refrain from giving alms, observing the precepts, and the rest of the first 5 bodhisattva practices, and for the present should instead take up the practice of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, which is the spirit of the single moment of understanding by conviction and the stage of rejoicing. This is the true intention of the Lotus Sutra. Invoke your Buddha mind now. Everything else can come after that. The main objective of the teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha for this time and age is get yourself some experience. Experience this potential you have for piercing through all of the distractions, Buddhahood. Instantiate your Buddha mind. Do that now. Everything else can come after that. And in truth, everything else will only have significance in general and specifically in your life once you, right? Who wants to go through the drudgery of working in a commercial kitchen, baking all day? Taste a really good custard, though. Taste of the product of what it is you're about to spend time doing and see if that doesn't motivate you. Not only to do it, but to excel at it. Right? It's food. There we go. Food. An analogy again. You could use it in anything, and I won't list them all. But enough said. If you want to know how to do something really well, then experience that first. Once you experience it, it's not hard for me now to make decisions toward doing this. Not knowing where this is going, I get distracted easily. It's the distraction thing. We live in the age of distraction, yeah? Hell, people are shouting out memetics and political slogans every day without having any idea the meaning of those statements or where it's leading. They're just cheering their ability to just say things And the more shocking those things are, the more they think they've accomplished saying something. You're completely lost from the dialogue of actually achieving something. This is the world we live in now. So what's the most important thing about your Buddhist practice? Experience Buddha. Then it gets easier and easier. Simple. Question. I've never seen or heard such an interpretation. Well, I'm amazed, and it seems my ears have deceived me. Should I believe you? Please show me scriptural evidence that proves this. Now, this is annoying. You can right now sit down with a friend who has a mandala, or if you have a mandala, you can chant together. You can do it. You can experience Buddha right now. Oh, but I'd rather read about it first. What the hell? Why are we so, less and less so today. But in my time growing up, I remember that if there wasn't some authoritative volume to read, to dissect, to prove that something was there, then there was no what? Reward? No self-reward, no stature in achieving it for yourself. Right? That was the whole basis of getting a high school diploma, an advanced degree. But I found myself telling people who snobs with their nose in the air, well, I have a this or that degree, so you don't know what you're talking about. And I was in an industry that was surrounded with engineers, just fresh out of school most of the time. And they would make the most horrific mistakes, life-threatening mistakes. And then, fortunately, in many cases, I had a boss, a supervisor of job sites who would turn the engineering requests for their fabrication. I worked in the fabrication and testing area. And he was impressed with me, and he said, here, why don't you give this a stab? See what this engineer is trying to do. And I would come back with a completely revised design, and it would blow away the engineer. It would make my boss snicker a little bit because he had a pet peeve about them. But point is, I had experience. I'd been out there in the field. I knew from practical experience the dangers and the ways of doing things correctly. And the engineers, some of them would be like, who the hell are you? You don't have a degree from any university. And I would say, well, you have to understand something, Ed, Bob, Frank, whoever it was. Before that book was written, that you so tag with little flags so that you can refer to it as your manual of truth, somebody had to do it. It may have been the guy who wrote the book or the gal who wrote the book, but it may not have. Books are assemblages of things that have long been understood or tested out. Very infrequently is a book a collection of rhetoric, a contemporaneous accomplishment and insight into. If you want that, you need to read the lab notes. You need to read the scribbles on the napkins and so forth of the person experiencing, testing, and observing and manifesting. That's where you'll get the truth. These polished books and everything, they have a lot of information in them, and that's great. But they're just references. They're not the end-all, be-all. Oh, so what are you saying? I'm saying before you can say anything about anything, you need to first experience it. If you can't get to that, then everything else is just fluff and dust. And isn't that what we're hearing Nichiren say? But yet he gets this question. Well, show me the book that says you're right. Oh, man. Stubbornness, yeah? Anyway, his answer is, the sutra says, quote, they, beginning practicers, need not build a stupa or a monastery in my honor, right? It's not about Shakyamuni or even Buddha as other. Once again, this is critical. Buddha is in your mind. It's not outside of you. Or make the 4 kinds of offerings, food, clothing, bedding, and medicine to the Sangha. It's not required that you do that, because what motivation do you have? I mean, it's a kindness, and believe me, I'm constantly telling our patrons, right, on Patreon and PayPal and so forth, how much I appreciate them. But that's not required for their enlightenment. That's something they're doing because of their enlightenment, because of the support for enlightenment. They're motivated because we experience Namo Myo Renge Kyo, our Buddha, mind, I, right? This passage from the sutra makes it clear that a beginning practitioner should refrain from giving alms, right? Because it's an empty gesture. Or observing the precepts. What precepts? In this Buddhism is simply what you see before you. It's a Butsudan, mandala, and chanting. Those are the only precepts. And the rest of the first 5 bodhisattva practices. Don't concern yourself with that. Concern yourself single-mindedly with experiencing Buddha, as Nichiren has said many times. From that place, from that experience, then these other gestures, much more profound. Yeah. Question, the sutra passage that you cite reveals that one should refrain from building stupas or monasteries and from making offerings to the Sangha, but it does not say anything about observing the precepts and other bodhisattva practices. Well, yeah, it does. He just said. Answer, by mentioning the first of the first 5 bodhisattva practices, the rest naturally follows. Pay attention. How do you know that? Okay, so obviously the question and answer format isn't of actual questions from people, but it's a device in order to deliver proofs, depths of teaching by the scholarship of Nichiren. So we can't get too angry at the ignorance of the questions. They're simply opportunities to dig deeper into the evidence in the words of Shakyamuni Buddha, yeah? Answer, because in the latter section, when speaking of the 4th stage of practice, the sutra says, quote, needless to say, anyone who not only keeps this sutra, but also gives alms, observes the precepts, practices patience, makes endeavors, concentrates his mind, and seeks wisdom, will be able to obtain the most excellent and innumerable merits, end quote. Right? This is what I was saying earlier. Once you experience truth in anything, then everything you do in support of that truth becomes profoundly changing, influential, meaningful. Back to the bakery. If all you do is follow word for word the recipe and you never taste or experience the result, okay, I made the recipe, yay. Taste it. See what you think. Maybe you want to adjust that recipe. Maybe you'll just revel in how wonderful it is. You have to experience it for yourself. From that comes everything else of value. Without it, everything's just rote. Repetition means nothing. This passage from the from the sutra makes it clear that people in the first, second, and third stages of practice should refrain in all of the the plebeian things, giving alms, observing the precepts, and the rest of the first 5 bodhisattva practices until they arrive at the 4th stage of practice, and then they are allowed to begin practicing them. Therefore, if they are only allowed to practice them in this stage, we know that they should refrain from practicing them in the first stages. So, we'd have to read more about the stages of bodhisattva, but the shorthand is simply what I've been saying all along, is that until you can sit down in front of your mandala and chant and get your focus away from all the distractions, your focus on Gohonzon, which is internal, right? The Honzon is in the mind. The mandala is not the Gohonzon. Let's make that clear. The mandala is your samsaric tool to distract all your consciousnesses into a single realization. And when that happens, that mandala, it floats, it vibrates, it starts to disassemble in your samsaric mind, because Buddha is opening in your mind, and Buddha is an alternate reality. It's a completely detached reality from thingness. So the mandala, being a thing, starts to lose its thingness. Don't let that perturb you. That's just an obvious samsaric clue that your mind has shifted, that your karma, your momentum has been influenced toward clarity, toward Buddha. Stay in that place. Right? For me, the mandala very quickly becomes 3-dimensional. The characters on the mandala are not attached to the background anymore. They shift in depth. And I hold them there, not by saying I'm holding them there, but by focusing on my daimoku, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I immerse my mind in Buddha. Then the mandala becomes the concepts in the Lotus Sutra, the beingness of Buddha. And I'm training my mind, my samsaric mind, to inculcate, to be in, to live in that Buddha state. That is what we're doing. That's why the mandala is so important to this practice. Not because the mandala has the power. We don't worship the mandala. We don't worship anything. We instantiate, we manifest willfully our existence through Buddha mind. That's why in the meditations in Gangyo, we say self-manifestation. Because with this samsaric apparatus we call self, we manifest. We don't worship. We manifest from within our own apparatus Buddha. You see? The sutra passage you just cited seems to support what you say, but do you have any support for the commentaries? Holy crap. How much conviction does this person need to have? Just do it. I'm surprised Nietzsche has this much patience, but that's what he is, a bodhisattva. Patience being one of our developed features as our confidence grows in Buddhahood, yeah? Would you seek evidence in the treatises of the 4 ranks of Buddhist teachers in India? What about taking up the writings of the teachers in China or Japan? In doing this, you reject the root to search among the branches. Leave aside the body to seek the shadow. Forget the source and value only the stream. And put aside a clear passage from the sutra to instead seek out the evidence from a treatise. That's what I've been saying. If the root of the sutra is opposed by the branch of the commentaries, will you reject the root sutra and keep the branch as the commentary instead? So I spoke too soon. Nichiren is a little fed up. Right? Why are you asking for folklore and stories? I just told you the root. Are you going to invalidate the root because something out here attracted your attention? Hello? In any case, in accordance with your request, here are some excellent passages of testimony. Facile 9 of the Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra says, quote, "The beginner is afraid that getting drawn into the myriad activities that are supporting conditions will hinder their practice of right action. At this time, they should solely uphold the sutra, which is the best kind of offering, by dispensing with other matters. In order to uphold the principle, they will gain enormous benefit." You see, that's exactly what I've been saying. Experience the goal, and then everything else will make sense personally to you. Stop looking for justifications, right? It's like the person who thinks they want to play tennis, but they can't until they get the $300 shoes, the $40 socks, the $1,000 racket, the best tennis balls, the best shorts, shirt, right? I can't do tennis unless I have all the good stuff. Dude, get out there and bat a ball around with somebody and see if it's even something you enjoy. Now, when you go out to buy a racket or shoes or whatever, you'll be able to answer the salesperson's questions as, well, how do you do this? Because this racket would be better than that one for you. And these clothes are better for, do you play indoors? You play outdoors? Blah, blah, blah. You'll have some context, and the decisions you'll make will be meaningful. Oh, no. I have to have all the stuff or I can't possibly play tennis. That's what's going on here. Play tennis. Rent a racket. Borrow a racket. It's the tennis that's important. Right? It's just as simple. That's this conversation right now. So he goes on. This commentary says that the supporting conditions are the first 5 of the 6 bodhisattva practices. A beginner who tries to practice them all as well will hinder his own right action of conviction. I only played well today because I had the right clothes on. Right? For instance, if a small boat overloaded with treasures tries to cross the ocean, both the boat and the treasures will sink. Oh, you were so prepared. You have no idea the nature of the task that you're headed into. You think you do, so you get all the right stuff, but you have no idea. The phrase solely uphold the sutra, quote unquote, does not even refer to the whole sutra, but only to upholding the daimoku, not any other passages. If even reading and writing the whole sutra is not allowed, then still less should the beginner attempt to practice the first 5 bodhisattva practices, because you have no basis, no investment in what those practices are. Don't attempt shakabuku or shoju until you yourself experience what it is you're trying to teach others. How ridiculous would that be? If your teacher in high school walked into the room and said, okay, I'm going to teach you guys algebra now. By the way, I have no idea what it is. How many of you would sit there without laughing and go, oh, this should be interesting. Right? I mean, my goodness. No way. Okay, we're going to put you under now, and the surgeon is going to cut into you and remove your spleen. By the way, he doesn't know what a scalpel is. He doesn't even know blood from soup. He's such a moron. He has no idea what he's doing. But we're going to let him cut you open and see what happens. Okay, count backwards from 10. How quickly would you jump off that frickin' table? I mean, it's that ridiculous. Chant. Experience this amazing, mind-altering practice. Then you can start to talk about it. Then you can start to research it. Then you can start to support it because you have a reason. You have a motivation. And more importantly, when you make those causes, they will be based on your enlightenment. They will support your enlightenment. There is nothing else. Other people's enlightenment will only come from your enlightenment. Not because you can read stories to them, but because you know the meaning of the stories to them. Your conviction, your enlightenment, that becomes your influence. If all you're doing is randomly throwing information out at people, that won't help them. And then you'll be asking, I don't know, I tried it, doesn't work. Well, you didn't try it. The phrase, quote, dispensing with other matters in order to uphold the principle, end quote, means to give up the observation of the precepts and the other matters and only practice the daimoku, which is the principle, what everything is about. Quote, they will gain enormous benefit means, conversely, that a beginner who tries to practice everything else and the daimoku at the same time will lose all the benefits of their practice because they'll be babbling nonsense. They won't know from what they speak. Words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra also says, quote, question, if this is so, then upholding the sutra is the foremost of right precepts. Why then does the sutra also talk of those who, quote, also observe the precepts? Answer, this is a clarification of the first stage of practice. We should not make things difficult by requiring the practice of what should only be developed later. Don't try to prove something works without having it work for you in the first place. I mean, that's not difficult to understand. Today's scholars are blind to this commentary and therefore hold the foolish people of the latter age of degeneration to the same standards as the two saints, Nanhui and Tendai. A terrible mistake to fall into. So this speaks to something that I've talked about briefly when Nichiren ends some of his letters and he says, you know, this is a great secret teaching, or keep this information secret. He's not playing games there and saying, you know, just don't tell anybody else about this. But secret, I take issue with that word because that's a bias, a cultural shortcut that really it cheats us about what he's really saying, what Nichiren is saying when in any of the dialogues or writings of Buddhism, when they talk about secret, or that's our translation of what they're talking about, immediately you should understand that it's not a secret so much as it's something that has to be carefully valued before it's shared. that it's something that requires a depth of knowledge and understanding before you can interpret it to the capacity of those that you're speaking to. And it may require that they themselves have a certain level of understanding before you open up the dialogue to more profound understandings, practice, yeah? This is why the most important thing you can do with anyone who asks you about Buddhism, if they're truly interested, and you have to be the judge of that, and the only way you can be the judge of that is if you practice enough to be able to sense it with Buddha, get them to chant with you. Introduce them to chanting. Just do that. As you do that, your mind will realign, be trained into an alternate clarity. Not alternate simply because it's different, but because the recognition of your lost mind of distraction will start to align, and things will start to make sense for you, and your environs will change because that's your environments, and that's just a reflection of your momentum, your karmic energy. And when you start to observe these changes, now we can start to talk about how to support your practice, how to support the practice, how to get more and more engaged in this clarity of mind and this new now experience of life, not just yours, but the entirety of life that you are now witnessing from a very, very different appreciation, standpoint, clarity. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Keep chanting. Keep your practice strong. Be mindful of your health. Single-mindedly chant to engage Buddha. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Be kind to yourself. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's amazingly easy. Enjoy your practice. And guess what? I will see you in the next one. Guaranteed. Bye for now.